Good evening, everyone. I am excited to welcome all of you here tonight as we celebrate this 50th year of Title IX. My name is Meggan Dulude, and I am an administrator in the athletics department, a proud Purple Knight alum, and a grateful beneficiary of Title IX. Title IX, passed on June 23, 1972, is legislation that guarantees girls and women receive equal access and treatment in education. It states, no person in the United States shall on the basis of sex be excluded from participation in, be denied benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any educational program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. At its inception, Title IX was created to provide equal opportunity for women to access education at a time when women were being denied acceptance into college, and most graduate and medical schools had a limit to the number of women that they would accept. Had the legislators who voted in support of its passage known the potential of its full power, many would never have been in support of it. We know this because of all of the efforts to repeal and redefine it in the years to follow. Its application to collegiate athletics was of particular concern. First in 1979 and then again in 1996 and 2005, the Department of Education issued policy interpretations and clarifications on how Title IX specifically relates to intercollegiate athletics. One of the many criticisms of Title IX is that it is confusing to understand, so I'm going to keep it very simple tonight. There are three areas Title IX is measured. They are participation, financial assistance, aka scholarships, and what we call the laundry list. And I like to think of the laundry list as a student-athlete's experience because it's made up of all of the different tangibles that athletic experience is composed of, like facilities, equipment, and coaching. It is in participation that we've seen the greatest impact of Title IX. Since its passage in 1972, high school girls' participation in sports has grown from 295,000 to 3.4 million. During that same time, high school boys' participation has grown from 3.6 million to 4.5 million. Similarly, women's collegiate athletics participation has grown from 30,000 to 219,000, and men's participation has grown from 170,000 to 279,000. An unfortunate consequence of Title IX has been the steep and sustained decline of women coaches of women's programs. At its peak, at 92%, we are now hovering at about 25%. Women in administration have had similar experiences, with only about 25% of athletics departments being led by women. As we've seen great success in participation and support of women's athletics, a lot of work remains ahead. With regard to participation, we know that girls and women of color, those with disabilities, those who come from low socioeconomic households, LGBTQ, trans, and non-binary youth are not experiencing the same gains, nor do they have the same access. This is the next frontier in the fight for Title IX. Equity and access to participation and scholarshiping for minoritized individuals and creating career paths for women who've been called to the work of intercollegiate athletics. And it is on those of us who've benefited from this work of those trailblazers who came before us to push this rock forward. Tonight, I am so pleased to have this wonderful group of rock pushers here with us. This group of former Purple Knight coaches and alums are here to share their experiences and reflect on the role Title IX has and continues to play in their lives. First up, right in the middle, Sue Duprat served the student athletes of St. Michael's College for 27 years as a coach and administrator. As the first female full-time employee of the athletic department, Sue won 327 games guiding the women's basketball team while also coaching cheerleading, field hockey, lacrosse, softball, and volleyball. Take a breath there. She is a member of the New England Basketball Hall of Fame. Sue was the athletic director at nearby Harwood Union for 14 years before retiring in 2017, but recently returned to an interim AD to continue supporting the Highlander community. Dr. Kimberly Quinn was a cross-country runner and Alpine skier at St. Michael's, helping the Purple Knights win two first the first two cross-country conference championships as a junior and senior. Since 2011, Kim has been a professor of psychology at Champlain College in Burlington, where she also serves as a well-being and success coach. She's also in high demand as a professional speaker on well-being in the workplace, presenting to colleges, universities, and business organizations. Kim is also a contributing writer for Psychology Today. Dr. Nadia DuBose Mitchell, class of 2001, was a women's basketball captain who has gone on to make an impact as an equity, inclusion, and racial justice leader. Through her scholarship on factors impacting the sustainability and empowerment of Black women leaders in predominantly white institutions, Nadia conceptualized the unique concept of the triple burden, which describes the weight Black women experience when navigating complex issues impacted by the intersection of race and gender. In 2021, Nadia co-founded the Creative Discourse Group, a company that helps communities and organizations to center the voices and experiences of those traditionally marginalized to build their capacity to be more equitable and inclusive. Prior to this work, Nadia served as the Equity Initiatives Director, Deputy Title IX Coordinator, and Deputy Bias Response Coordinator at Champlain College in Burlington. She supports a number of community organizations and currently serves as an advisory board member for the Burlington Discover Jazz Festival and a corporator for Northfield Savings Bank. Lindsay McNall, class of 2017, is the only All-American swimmer in college history, becoming the first St. Michael's swimmer or diver to compete at an NCAA championship. As a senior captain, she was a 3-time Northeast 10 Conference champion, won 102 races, and graduated with 8 school records and an NE10 championship mark. Lindsay returned to St. Michael's as the top men's and women's diving assistant coach for the 2021-22 season to mentor the current generation of Purple Knights. She works full-time as a math interventionist at Stowe Middle School. Eleanor Devereux, class of 2022, was a 2-time women's cross-country captain at St. Michael's College. A regular scorer and contributor throughout her undergraduate career, Eleanor was a Dean's List student and earned the Professor John Carvello Scholarship in Economics. She gained induction into Chi Alpha Sigma, Kappa Delta Pi, and Omicron Delta Epsilon Honor Societies. Since graduating last May with degrees in elementary education and economics, Eleanor has begun her teaching career with elementary students at Malice Bay School in Colchester. Marikate Kelley is a veteran lacrosse coach and an official at both the college and high school levels. In her 9th season guiding the St. Michael's women's lacrosse team, the Purple Knight posted a 57-32 record. Marikate helped the Purple Knights win the Northeast 10 Conference Championship in 1999, the first season the league sponsored the sport. She continues encouraging the growth of the sport in Vermont, including at the high school level. In 2019, Marikate led the Virgins Mount Abraham Co-op team to an undefeated season and a state championship and earned State Coach of the Year. And finally, I'm proud to introduce our incredible student moderator, Emilie Webster. Emilie is a senior on the women's lacrosse team, has been heavily involved around campus throughout her undergraduate career. A Northeast 10 Conference academic all-conference selection as a junior, Emilie is a biology major and a Spanish and chemistry double minor. She is Student Government Association's Secretary for Athletics, President of the Omicron chapter of Beta Beta Beta, a volunteer advanced EMT for St. Michael's Rescue, and a tutor and teaching assistant in biology. Emilie completed an undergraduate scholar research fellowship in microbiology in 2021. So I would like to welcome the entire panel and Emilie to kick us off.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming. So we're going to start off with a simple question for all our panelists. What does Title IX mean to you? And if you want to speak, you can raise your hand and I can pass the microphone down to you.
We are looking at you. The smartest one here. No. Oh, the microbiologist.
Okay, oh wow, okay. Hi everyone. I have to tell you what's coming to me just sort of like a squirrel is in Title IX. To quickly say, starting off with being a little girl and then high school and then here, this will be quick, I promise. I was, sort of athletic from the ground up, just all over it, and especially with, well, baseball and skiing. And I remember being like 8 years, I'm 58, so do the math there, right? So when I was in the league, the town league, it was the boys got the uniforms, like the nice pinstripes, cotton, socks, all that stuff, and we got a t-shirt. And we had to throw a grapefruit around, it wasn't even a hard ball, right? So it makes no sense. Look at the size of most female hands. It doesn't, it's like ridiculous. So that there, I went, you know, baseball, high school, and I'm like, what? I shouldn't say that. Because I was a shortstop. Well, if you know, baseball doesn't, you don't have to be big to be good, right? Look at Dustin Pedroia. I'm actually a Yankee fan, but that was a good example. So fast and agile. I remember sitting, I played softball, which I did not like as much. I'm not saying anybody's playing softball, I'm just like, I was a hardball person. And I remember sitting on the hill watching a couple of guy friends on the team, and I'm saying, okay, I'm better than you, and you. Something's really wrong with this. You know, stuck in a slower game. Again, no offense to softball, I was just more of a hardball person. And then moving into St. Mike's, what a huge difference. And I'm gonna wind it up here. I could stay and talk about Zach Budovich all, like, for all night, the cross-country coach. But it was, things evened out. The cross-country team was the cross-country team. It wasn't, you got the good uniforms, you get a t-shirt, a scratchy, awful t-shirt, not even like cotton, right? Everybody, like when we traveled, it was all even. Everything was, you're just part of this team, not the men, boys or men are here, and you're the second fiddle feeling. It was the first time in my athletic life that I felt on the same, you know, level as the guys.
Oh, what had to happen before that happened for you. I came here not long, so like, I don't know what, 4 years after, 3-4 years after Title IX was enacted, and nobody knew what the heck that meant at all. But go back with me a few decades to those mid-70s, and St. Michael's had previously been an all-male Catholic school, and they hire a woman to be the first, hire me to be the first woman administrator in the athletic department. What could possibly go wrong with that? So the good news is they didn't really know what to do with me. That was the good news. The bad news is, what the stuff that they did know, we kind of got that stuff where we didn't get good uniforms. I drove a 15-passenger van, which is now illegal. You can't drive those anymore with teams. 15-passenger van with my teams, because we couldn't get the bus. The men even, so it was men's basketball, no, it was basketball and girls basketball. Then we got them to stop doing that, and they would call it men's basketball and girls basketball. So we had to work for that a few more years. And then it was, okay, men's basketball and women's basketball, but it's really basketball and the other people. We got terrible practice times. We would practice on the main court at Ross, where the curtains fell, so the glass backboards, the curtains that divided the end courts closed those two baskets off for us. And on the end courts, they had intramural volleyball or basketball. While my varsity basketball practice was going on, because we had to get out of there in time for the men to practice, and they could practice for 2.5 hours in a full gym and have all the baskets and all of that. And like I said, even to go to UVM, the men's team would take a charter bus, one of those nice big charter buses that you all now take, right? To go to UVM. And I had to drive to all of our games, Pennsylvania, we went to Florida in a 15-passenger van. We only had one blowout on the highway, and one of my players changed the tire. It was such a bad idea to do that. So what Title IX meant to me, it wasn't so much what we didn't have, as much as just chomping away at what we should have. And starting to insist that, could you read the rule again? just read the rule again, because this isn't equitable. It's not even close to equitable. That the thought that, one of my very favorite stories was that when we started playing pretty good basketball, and we were drawing quite good crowds. And so I said to the boss, I said, you ought to think about charging for our games. The boss's response was, who'd pay to see you? Well, then we started playing double headers with the men's team. And they were losing so much money because people would come to the women's game, so they could watch the women's game for free and stay through the men's game and not pay. So the boss is like, well, now let's change that. So the advice from all of that is when they tell you it's not the money, it's the principle, it's the money. It's always the money.
I'll keep mine very short. I think when I think of what Title IX means to me, I think of the word opportunity. I specifically think of that there are a lot of the pieces of the story that I can relate to, right? Both of these two stories, but I think for me, when I came to St. Michael's College, I was one of the first or only or ever, I don't know exactly, women to come to St. Mike's from Burlington High School. So I actually grew up in Burlington down the road and came to St. Mike's, and I remember just the opportunity to come to St. Mike's not having a path in front of that, and thinking about the way in which Title IX meant that there would be funding for me to participate. But I don't use the word opportunity as a period, right? There are still so many ways that that when I think about the implications today, especially as administration has changed in our country, and there have been attempts to roll back, the opportunities that the assurances that Title IX is providing for opportunity. I think about we still have more opportunity to continue to challenge what it means, right? When folks are trying to reimagine what Title IX is and who's included in using that legislation. Think about who's excluded from that. I think about the way in which there was an opportunity for me. There were some gaps in that, and I can talk more about that as we keep answering other questions, but there are some gaps in what opportunity allowed me. And it's not, also the last thing I'll say, it's not an opportunity just about what it provided for me, but what it provides to institutions to be able to be more equitable and inclusive, right? The opportunity to be challenged on that.
Title IX is why I became a lawyer. And I believe deeply in equity. When I was in high school, we had some girls' teams, but not many. Someone brought a complaint, an equal rights complaint, and because of that complaint and a lawsuit, by the time I was a junior, they created a soccer team, they created a field hockey team. They didn't have lacrosse through my high school. Interestingly, I became a lacrosse coach, but, and then when I got to college, it was the same thing. I went to Boston College. Football was big there, basketball was big there for the men's programs. During the time I was at Boston College again, there was an equal rights complaint brought under Title IX, and because of that, we started getting similar uniforms. We started being able to use the weight room. We weren't even able to use it initially when I got there. Scholarships were offered. They started a lacrosse team. They started a softball team. So it was huge, and the legal landscape is sort of everybody was fighting against it. The NCAA fought against it. Politicians fought against it. There was the Supreme Court decided it didn't apply to sports at one point, but then the Congress passed a law. The president signed it. That said, yeah, it does apply to sports. Nowhere in Title IX does it say athletics, doesn't mention sports. So it wasn't focused on that. But yeah, for me, it sort of defined, in a lot of ways defined the path I took in my life.
Thank you all. I see a common theme of opportunity that should have been granted in the first place. So going off of that, how has your experience in athletics shaped you as a person? How have the skills you gained through your experience in athletics shaped your everyday life?
Can we get the question repeated?
How has your experience in athletics shaped you as a person, and how have the skills you've gained through your experience in athletics shaped your everyday life?
Yeah, my life has been completely shaped by the sport of swimming. I've been in the water since I was 6, both recreationally and on a team. And I've also had, I don't know if it's the fortune of, but I've had the opportunity, it's always been a co-ed team. I've always swum with boys and girls. Fortunately for me, my team was divided by skill and speed. It wasn't the boys on one side, the girls on the other side. That also meant that I had to learn how to swim with boys that didn't want girls in their lane, they didn't want you there. And then coming to college, I was the fastest swimmer during practice among all of the boys and women. And I kicked their ass. And it sucked when they were faster than me at meets, but that very first day, freshman year, I remember jumping in and reminding myself that I belong here and this is my place. And now I bring that into my work everywhere I go. So thank you to everyone. Title IX means a lot more to me now than it did before. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would say hearing all these people's stories, like appreciation is the first thing that comes to my mind, because as a white middle-class female, like I haven't been told outright no in my life. But there's definitely been times where I've experienced bias based on my gender. When I was younger, my sisters and I and my mom used to all race at trail 5Ks on Tuesdays, and the field was made up of all people aged from like 10 to like 75 years old, and it would take them however long to run the 5K. And I remember sitting down with friends afterwards, and the boys who were like the faster ones would be like, oh, like let me look at the results, like did you get chicked, like did someone beat you? And they'd all like hit each other and like, oh, like a girl beat you, like that's so embarrassing. And looking back at it, I feel like it was motivation to go and beat them next time, but now looking at it, it's like, why should you be embarrassed that a girl is beating you? And I think it comes down to just the societal pressure that's on boys and women to like stay in their lane, I guess.
Okay, so we're moving it down. I'm just gonna be quick this time because this is partially St. Mike's in general, because this place absolutely changed my life. So if you throw the sports in there with cross country and the Alpine ski team, the character building was just phenomenal. You know, and that running is a lifestyle. You know, I'm still running, not at this minute, but today. And 3 of our 5 kids went here, and one of our daughters was on the cross country team too. And it did the same thing for her that it did for me, because it is a lifestyle. It's a holistic, you know, it's how you do it all really kind of thing. And then there's the thing you were just saying about the evenness with the Title IX, like with the Alpine, this is false news right here. I was on the Alpine ski team, although they carried us a lot, so we liked them a lot. It was really, really competitive. And I thought it was very cool the way that it felt I felt very accepted. Like the guys, we were challenged in a good way. It wasn't like we're better than you. It was kind of, we were all in it together. And there was one young woman on the team who was phenomenal. Juliana, I forget her last name, but she beat every guy on the team. So that was also good.
So I need to make an editorial comment for our swimmers here, that when I started at St. Michael's, at the time, the NCAA would define non-contact sports that they could be co-ed sports. So cross-country and swimming and those sorts of sports, golf, I suppose. They didn't have to provide a women's team. They had to allow women to participate. So our swim team, our men's swim team at the time, wasn't great. They weren't, I mean, they were just kids who came to college and then became swimmers. I think some of them had swum coming up that, but whatever. And then we started putting women on the team. Now they had to compete in the men's events because there were no women's events. And similar to our panelists, our women started beating the men every day in practice and in meets. And suddenly we had a women's swim team. Because that's what happens. That when women challenge, they're like, wait a minute, you have your own team. And now, I know they compete and you all get along and that's wonderful, but when it started, it was a men's team that allowed women to participate graciously. And then when the women started to win, they had to have their own team, which is awesome because we got an extra coach and we got all the other, and more opportunities because obviously in the races, you can't race everybody in all the races. So the women got more opportunities and that was wonderful. And I think, you know, back to the question of what does that mean in our everyday life, my everyday life, if we truly believe that participation in co-curricular activities, and athletics particularly, provides opportunities to learn that we cannot replicate in a classroom. If we believe that, then those opportunities have to be available to absolutely everyone, regardless of whether or not you can afford to go to summer camp when you're 6 years old and play on a soccer team, regardless of whether any of those, whether you have the financial resources, whether you have some sort of physical challenge or emotional challenge or whatever it is, if we really believe that what we're teaching is educational and cannot be replicated in a classroom, then we damn well better put our money where our mouth is and provide those opportunities equitably. And I think St. Michael's is a wonderful place for me to grow because most of the time they didn't know what the hell I was doing. We got ignored so much. We could grow the program and not get yelled at too much. When I got yelled at, I let Zaf take the heat and then we went on. But opportunity, like Nadia said, that opportunity, it can't be in a silo for just the kids who can afford it, or just the kids whose mom and dad have the access to bring you to a something, a camp, or get you on a summer league team, or something like that. It's got to be universal, and that, I think, is going to be our next biggest challenge.
Yeah, thank you. So I really appreciate that because I was thinking about, you know, so I played basketball and I still try, although when you're at my age and you sprain your ankle, it doesn't heal properly. I think that to Sue's point, one of the things that I was thinking about was, so I have a master's degree in sport management, and my master's thesis, research and project was on youth participation in sport. It was specifically based on the idea that youth participation can impact your life. So it wasn't just, I have the opportunity because I'm privileged, right, to play elite sport, but it was more like, what are all those skills like determination, drive, commitment, focus, blah, blah, blah. You can keep going, that you're all getting because you have the opportunity, those of you who play sports here at St. Michael's College. And so it drove me to like create this organization that, you know, I started and ran for a minute to not just look for funding so that kids can access sports, even if they can't afford it, right? So the rest of the community having the responsibility to fund athletics for youth who would not otherwise have access, not because of the becoming an elite athlete, but because of specifically because of the skills that you get that would help them into their future. And, you know, I can continue on, but we have lots of other questions, but I think that's one of the things that comes to mind with you.
I would just reiterate that I think sports gives you confidence, it develops your confidence. If you play team sports, you live and learn how to work with teammates, work with people to reach goals. You learn to fail and how to deal with that and how to come back the next day and work on what you need to work on to get better. And all those skills, determination, really important. And I do think sports is a better environment or just the way sports are set up. It's easier to learn a lot of those skills playing sports than in the classroom. Given that, I would also reiterate kind of Sue's point and Nadia's point that we do have an issue with equity and particularly outside of colleges now. Still, we have work to do at the college level, but I see it's not as bad here in Vermont as in a lot of places, but in a lot of places, high school sports, kids aren't playing high school sports. They're playing on some club team. Their parents are shelling out lots of money for them to play on the club team. And if you don't play on the club team, you're not going to play in college. And we got to do something to fix that.
Thank you so much. I totally agree. I just wanted to keep picking your brains about this topic. So Ashlyn Johnson, founder of the Inclusion Playbook, an organization that helps sports programs implement diversity and trans inclusion programs, notes that despite this surge of sports opportunities, some groups lag behind. For example, girls of color receive fewer opportunities than both white girls and boys of color when it comes to playing athletics. And LGBTQ youth are participating in sports at alarmingly low rates. What do you think is our collective responsibility to create change and equitable opportunities rather than just equal ones?
This one frosts me pretty good. So Title IX meant there was, even reluctantly, an influx of money into women's sports programs. Yes, all the football people wanted, and mostly this happens at the college level. Football people didn't want it because, we can't have our 100 scholarships anymore, or whatever. But Title IX happened, they started all of those lawsuits, they started to put money in women's college sports, which made it attractive to all kinds of coaches, which is one of the reasons we don't have women coaching, is because they even the playing field money-wise, almost sort of. At the big schools, forget it, it's not even close. But at most schools, it's going to be kind of equitable. And so all the guys are like, well, I can either coach the guys' team or the women's team, and I'll get the same kind of thing. And so that applicant pool got huge. And then scholarships came along, and now parents are seeing that their son and daughter equally have a shot, depending on how good they are, at getting a scholarship. So now, where the money started to go wasn't into colleges or even into high schools, it's into clubs, where there is no federal funding, so there is no Title IX protection. So that's where we're losing or not gaining kids. That there are no programs, very few programs, in most places that serves those kids, unless their parents have the money to put them on teams. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's what the privilege of having the resources gets you. It gets you a more select group that moves through the thing. Now, one of the things that happened during COVID, at the high school and middle school and elementary school level, is we realized that schools do much more than educate kids. They feed them. For some kids, it's the only meals they will get. And I don't mean in inner city any place, I mean every town in Vermont. We have a significant population who will not eat if they don't eat at school. It's also where they get a lot of health care. They have to see the nurse at school because they can't afford to go to a doctor, they don't have health insurance. So all of it. So the state decided they're going to feed all the kids. Every kid gets free breakfast, free lunch, and that has continued. And here's a statistic that just ought to blow your mind. Since that's happened, the number of students at middle and high schools who take advantage of eating breakfast at schools has tripled. Because they can. They go and eat because they can. And the number of students who are eating lunch has doubled in every school. If you know anybody in a school, ask them whether that has happened. We found the money to feed kids, which for God's sakes, why aren't we always feeding all the kids? We have to find a way to get the money into elementary schools for sports participation. Because those kids are, the kids who are going to the U8 soccer programs, they're in school. So they have classmates who are not able to participate in that. If we can feed them, and we ought to, why the hell aren't we also educating them in every aspect of their life? And that's, again, it's a matter of, if you had the will, you'd find the money.
As a teacher, I would say that I see the inequitable aspects, specifically of sports, every day at school. The kids who have the parents that are capable of paying for those travel leagues and getting them to practices and tournaments are often more skilled than the ones who play on school teams or rec teams or even just out in their backyard. And then there are the students who you might not even think of that want to be athletes, but they can't because their parents are working 3 jobs and can't pick them up and get them to practice every day. And I would say that it goes beyond just athletics, but also a lot of times the skills that you learn in your sports make you a leader in your school as well. And so you see that social status come into play of the kids who are the leaders of the friend groups are also the ones who are on those elite sports teams. And they're at recess and they're picking the team. So it goes into a lot more than just sports, but it's positively impacting the lives of those who play them, but it's negatively impacting the lives of those who want to but can't. No?
Just had one quick thing on that. There's not only in terms of being an athlete and getting a scholarship is it impacted, but it also impacts whether you get into that college because student athletes have a much higher rate of admissions at college. I was shocked when I saw the Harvard lawsuit. It was like 86% of recruited athletes get admitted. Now, there's some weaning that goes on ahead of time in terms of the coaches don't recruit kids that they don't think will get in, but even legacy parents or children of parents who went to the school or donated to the school, they're at like 50%. So it's huge in terms of getting those opportunities. And then once you get out of college, at least for women athletes, I think it's over 80% of the business leaders in the United States, the women business leaders, over 80% have played college sports. So the skills that we've talked about, they make a huge difference throughout your life. And if we don't give kids an opportunity starting right from the start, it's not a fair race.
Thank you all so much. So I just wanted to bring it to a totally different question. Could you please share with us the moment when you heard your first no? Why? Because you're a girl. What did that moment teach you, and how did you move forward from it?
So this was my second year coaching for the men and women's swim and dive, well, mostly swim team. So this was also the first year that I got to coach in a weight meet by myself as the solo coach for like close to 40 kids on the men and women's swimming and diving team. One of those sports I know absolutely nothing about, but I'm expected to coach them somehow. That's another issue though. So we get to the pool. I'm very familiar with it. I know the coach. I can handle this. It's just a swim meet. The officials come on deck and they are very, very old. white men. And they're polite at first, but as soon as the meet starts, Bentley's scoreboard doesn't work, which means that we have no idea how fast the swimmers are going or what their times are, which is more often a problem than I would like to think. Anyways, so I'm smart. We all have stopwatches on our phones. Me and a couple of the other swimmers that are just on full deck, they're not swimming for other reasons, we're ready. We've got our stopwatches, we've got our split sheets, we're ready to do our thing. One of the male coaches comes over and is like, you know, it might be a good idea if you have a watch on so that you can start it when I do and you can get their time. And I'm like, oh my God. I know what I'm doing. Like, this is my job. You wouldn't have explained this to another male coach, most likely. They also thought that one of my male swimmers that wasn't swimming, standing on deck, was the head coach. So yeah, it wasn't exactly a no, but it was more like, I don't think you know what you're doing. He also screwed up warm-up times more than once. Just figuring that, you know, the other coach doesn't need to know what's going on throughout the swim meet. So I learned that that's going to happen a lot more in the future and that I just need to continue sticking up for myself, not apologizing, and reminding them that I know what I'm doing.
All right, back at the baseball issue, because I actually remember, I forget how old, because it's different way back in the day. It didn't start as early as you do now, so I think like middle school it started to open that up. Maybe early middle school. I remember being like, maybe earlier, 10, I guess. And with that whole scratchy polyester t-shirt thing, when the guys got the uniforms, I remember thinking as a little girl, just this light bulb went on, like, you're not as important as they are. Like, I remember thinking that. You're not as valuable, I don't know, fill in the word, but like that, the boys get the good uniforms, the boys get all the attention, like the draft and all that, the whole thing with the league. But we were just like, and they couldn't get people to coach very easily for the little girls, so they just didn't want to do it. Actually, my dad did it. But I just remember feeling like that. And then there's the whole hardball thing. Again, I'm not dissing any softball. But I was a shortstop, fast and agile, and I wanted that little ball. Look at the size of this hand. It doesn't need to throw a softball around. And when in high school, it's just a hard no. Like you're not playing on the actual baseball team with the good uniforms, right? And I'll just tell you on a happy note, 3 of our 5 kids went to school here, and our youngest son married also a St. Mike's person. She is a baseball person. And she played hardball right up through high school and was on the state of Vermont team for the championships. So she pitched too.
I'll add to that what you were saying, Kim. I was thinking along the lines of I don't know that I have a particular story of someone outright using the word no. I mean, there are plenty of times people told me no, right? But it's more about the ways that we experience no just by existing, right? So it makes me think that as women, you know, what we experience, you know, we've already talked about, right? All the ways that we get told no. We've heard lots of stories. And for me personally, I think about the intersections of my race and my gender and the way in which Black women get told no more frequently than white women, right? Than white men, and even Black men, right? We have a different plight. And the reality is that it's not always someone actively telling me no because, right, let's face it, people don't really have that kind of courage. It's about the ways in which the system and the structures prevent us from excelling, right? Let me be great, right? I can't be because the structure is in place of preventing that. So the word no, all the ways in which we hear these stories, they're all the same thing except they're magnified when you're a Black woman trying to exist in this world. So I hear no regularly, all the time, every day, no matter where I am. And, you know, I think pushing back on that no for me, you know, I live that reality. I live that reality more now because one of the things that didn't come through on my bio is I'm a mother. I have 2, my daughters here. Hi, Nyla. Raise your hand. I brought her along with me. She's a sophomore at Burlington High School, and she's a baller too, and she's incredible. Just look her up, just on paper. Inherited. She's way better than I ever was. I promise you. But anyway, it's about the ways in which, you know, I as a parent see that I'm constantly encouraging my children to also recognize what's happening, especially my daughter, I have a son too, but particularly my daughter in the ways that she's being told no, in ways that people aren't using words, right? They're just preventing her from being great in her excellence, right? And so I think for me, that's more important. That's more of what I experience, right? Not what I mean put in this space.
So there was no softball when I was young. The first opportunity to play sports was Little League baseball, right? But girls weren't allowed. So my brother, we're Irish twins. He was going out for the baseball team, and I was asking, hey, I want to play too, telling my parents, and they're like, well, you can't. Only boys can play. You're not allowed. My sister, who's 4 years younger than me, played, and she was better than all the boys. She played shortstop, and they were picking the all-star teams. And one of the men picking the all-star team said, no, she cannot be on the all-star team because she's a girl. I don't care how good she is. So lots changed from that time, but kind of what Sue was talking about, how girls started to be good, and then, okay, let's have softball.
This is such an issue. I forgot this part. Okay, the length of the bases really pissed me off in high school because you've got like this with the softball length was okay when you're a kid because you're little, right? But in high school, the 90-foot bases and actual versus pitching from like me to you. You know what I mean? Like seriously, oh, more issues. The whole sliding thing, like it's not even fun. Like the controlled high school softball thing, you can't even like do your thing. Like slide, good action, like it was always. We also controlled the number of forget this now. Like overrunning, you couldn't do that either. Like it was such a different game. At least way back when, I don't know now. But if you can't slide. You can't run through somebody. What fun is it really? And then the whole pitching thing, the underhand, and it's like from me to like 10 feet. I mean, it's really sort of stupid.
As a former softball player at St. Michael's, I feel like I need to step in here real quick and say, they are completely different games, right? And when you grow up playing baseball, your experience is so different than growing up playing softball. And I would imagine that most people growing up playing softball now, that they know that game is different than the game that created it, right? And that's true for a lot of our sports. A lot of our sports have come a long way. We talk about basketball. Women weren't allowed to cross half, right? It was a 6-person sport, and you had to stay on your side because they were concerned about the health of women to cross the sport. So we've seen changes in the actual sports as a result of women's participation, which I think is one of the great positives of Title IX, because we are finding our own place, we're finding our own sports, and we're finding great success in those places, but they are completely different.
Can I put in my own little story? Okay, first time I was told no, I asked my dad if I could play football, and he said no, and when I asked him why, he was scared that I would get hit and I'd get hurt, or that the coaches would say something to me that would hurt my feelings. And what that moment taught me was that women are in society put in a place where they have to choose a sport where they can't be sensitive, because if they get hit, they'll get hurt, and then they'll want to quit. So it kind of is interesting, and I wonder if my dad said, yeah, you should try out for football, like where I would be, but it's interesting how those implicit messages can really shape your idea of what it means to be a woman. So, next question. We have 2 more questions, and then we'll be done with the panel. So, next question. Title IX is a start, as you all have heard, but there is still more work to be done in creating equality. Where do you think there are still discrepancies that need to be changed at the collegiate level in professional sports and globally?
I'll name protections for trans athletes. I think that's one of the clearest example of that for me today. I think we see anti-trans legislation that's coming, and it's growing currently, and that's impacting athletics. Here in the state of Vermont, if you follow the news here locally, I know as a college student, you don't really, like, you probably are still looking at the news back home, but here, if you do, you would have an awareness of a high school in Vermont who opted not to play in this round of tournament play against a school because of a trans athlete on their team. And it was the first time that that the Vermont Principals Association, who governs athletics, high school athletics in the state of Vermont, took a significant action to name that school was out of sort of compliance with their policy, and they need some state legislation that made it that so it made the school who opted not to play ineligible to participate in VPA sanctioned events, which means mostly all athletics in the state of high school athletics in the state of Vermont. And so I think for me that was a significant moment, and it also had me think about prior to that happening in the state of Vermont in high school athletics. There are plenty over the past couple of years. There have been many racist incidents that have been happening in high school athletics and in the sporting environment. And in particular, again, if you look up my daughter, you'll see her on the news, where she led her team around talking through racist incidents that recently have been happening and how it's impacting, especially Black girls who are trying to play, just exist and play their sports here. And I think it reminded me of the push to ask for the Vermont Principals Association to look at policy and to make considerations, right? But then to watch that transition, right? What they were able to do with regards to trans athletes. So it was a moment of hope. Someone said, I wish we could do this when like someone was racist. Like, well, that's you can't be racist, right? That's against policy. So sorry, you can't play sports until you can fix that. That doesn't happen. But it's also a moment of reflection of like what we can do, right? If we have the right policies in place, if we have the right commitments in place, how we might support students to be successful, especially at the high school level, so that they can show up in the seats that you're sitting in.
Speaking specifically to that situation in Vermont, there were many of us who lobbied the VPA to say, you got to put your money where your mouth is. That this school forfeited a tournament game because they didn't want to play against a trans athlete. And so there were those of us, because now I'm back being an athletic director, what was I thinking? And we just said, you have policy, we have state law. You can't let this happen, or tell us which policies we don't have to follow anymore. So they said, yep, we're giving you your dues back. You can't participate as a VPA member. Any school in Vermont that is a VPA member who plays that school now, it only is a scrimmage. You can't count it as a game. And there are those of us who believe the VPA followed through on that because we kicked them in the shins a little bit and we held them accountable. That if we have rules and policies that are there for the welfare of all of our athletes, then we have to protect, all of us have to do it, protect all of our athletes. And the racism thing it's awful. And we ignore it unless it kicks us in the shins. I have to tell you, like, one of the saddest things that ever happened to me here at St. Michael's. We started recruiting because we actually had scholarships. And I got called into an office of an administrator who shall never be named. And I was told I should not ever recruit Black women, ever. And the rationale, forgive me, God, for saying this again, the rationale was, who would they date? Think about that. It wasn't 1950, it wasn't 1970. It was later than that, because we didn't get scholarships for quite a few years. Who would they date? So now we had, forever, had African American men on our men's basketball team. And so I asked, so if you want to say what was my no, that was my no. And I said, well, did you ask the men's coach who those guys would date? Well, no. I'm like, do you really believe women go to school only to find a husband? Well, so I left that office, and then we recruited our first African-American woman. It was not Nadia, but it could have been.
Okay, there's a couple of things here. I just want to make sure I clear up that softball thing. because here's the thing, is they are two different games, which is where I'm going next. I just wish I could have had the choice. That's what it comes down to. So I want to make sure I'm super clear, because I appreciate all the athletes, and that was just my issue, that ugly issue from the 70s. That's why. I was told no. That's like, I could not do my thing, and that was not okay. So that brings me to what I would change, which is actually not coming from the baseball issue. I was here, oh God, it was ages ago. We were doing one of our 3-part documentaries. I was interviewing St. Mike's students for different reasons, and this was specifically the sports one. I forget what that whole context was, but 2 of the young women were really agitated when they were talking about these. One played soccer, one played lacrosse. The soccer young lady was talking about how they call fouls so much easier on the women than they do on the men. I'm sure basketball, you know that better than anybody, and also the other ones here. And then the lacrosse woman was saying how it's like an entirely different game. Like, I can't even do my thing out there. They're both saying basically, I can't even do my thing out there. Is it gonna blow the freaking whistle? Just let me do my thing. And I saw it with our own kids. With 5, they played everything. Calling basketball fouls in middle school that they never would have called on a boy. So I said, even the rules. Lacrosse is lacrosse, soccer is soccer, and basketball is basketball. And not the WNBA, but the NBA, the WNBA. Whole other issue.
I would say that a lot of the less evident aspects of fostering equality lay beyond, like you said, the scratchy t-shirts and the numbers of athletes that we have now. But like in today's society, girls and women have begun to see more accurate representation of themselves, but the societal norm to be like thin still lurks in the shadows. And in relation to sports, I think that many women are worried specifically about weightlifting, because it might make them appear bulky or masculine. And so then I ask myself the question, like, why is a muscular male stature viewed differently than a muscular woman's stature? And again, that goes back to, I think, societal values. But I think those things that aren't open to the blatant eye, another example of that is in terms of uniform guidelines with women. I know with cross country we wear short shorts, sometimes even what we call underwear, like the swimming suit bottoms. And like some of my teammates aren't comfortable wearing those things, but when it comes to the big regional meets, we have to wear the same uniform. So that means that she's uncomfortable in the short shorts because we don't have enough long ones for all of us to wear. So things that might not be really apparent to the eye anymore, but are still really affecting women athletes.
So not only are there more men coaches in athletics, college athletics, they are also paid way more than any of the female coaches in college athletics. Even no matter what, it is a fact, almost always, even if the female coach has a winning record compared to their male counterparts. And you can go look up other stats, but equal pay would be nice.
We've made a huge amount of progress because of Title IX, and we should really celebrate it on its 50th anniversary. But there are lots of other things that need to be done that aren't in college necessarily and aren't just based on sex. So transgender, people of color, people who are economically disadvantaged, they don't have the same opportunities. It's sort of, I think Title IX though creates a good jumping block to now be able to focus our energy on these other issues. I've been watching the NCAA women's basketball tournament. It's amazing seeing all those full stands. I took my kids up to Canada when the World Cup was up there because I thought, Well, when are my girls gonna be able to see that level of women athletes? Now, there weren't many people in the stands that year, but you watch the National Women's Soccer team play now, and both in their league and, you know, at the World Cup. It's huge what's happened in recent years, and I think Title IX is a big part of why that's happened. I also think that we need to support by showing up at games, and that's, you know, Sue kind of said it's about the money. I mean, a lot of what's made NCAA and the World Cup League make changes is because people are showing up at games and there's money to be made. But in terms of what needs to be done outside of that, we got a long ways to go.
And that speaks directly to opportunity, because the average sports fan has not in the past had the opportunity to watch women's sports. So they're on ESPNQ or something, and they're now, some of those games are going to now be on ABC. It's going to be awesome because it's not just the opportunity for the women participants, but it's the opportunity for people to see what that's generating. And that means it's got to be on TV. It's got to be sourced and financed. And the NCAA totally sucks at equity. It's awful. I mean, you can say whatever you want to say, but it ain't even close. You look at the top women's basketball programs, D1, top men's basketball program, and then you look at how the NCAA treats their tournaments and everything they do, it ain't even close. So when we say we have a lot to do, not at college, we still have a lot to do with those old boys who are running that show, because it stinks. And we need that to change, and it ain't gonna be us changing it, ooh, you guys. So thank you for that.
I think you all really put it really well, showing that society's determination of human value can really determine funding towards certain programs and the opportunities that leads to, and how it leaves others behind. So thank you so much for shedding light on that subject. Our last question, just in celebration of 50 years of women playing sports, what advice would you give to current female student athletes that you wish you received when you were where we are now?
As a runner, I've always struggled with race anxiety. It's more of an independent sport than it is performance-wise. You have your team around you, but you're really competing against yourself. And it's often had a negative effect on my performance. During workouts, I would always be in the front of the pack, but in races, I would never perform at that caliber. And I think mental toughness is a huge aspect of running. But it's also an aspect that's really hard to work on. It's easy to stay consistent and go out for all of those runs, but it's really hard to sit down and read a book that makes you uncomfortable and question your thinking. And so I wish I put more work in, not physically, but mentally. I wish I could have talked to my coaches more and read more books. So my advice would be to act on those areas of weakness rather than hoping something will just eventually change.
My advice to all of the women, not just athletes, but women especially, is respect yourself, your body, your mind. Surround yourself with people that respect and support yourself and who you are trying to be. Just keep that in mind, and don't let anyone disrespect you or tell you that you can't do anything.
I would say, understand that our life minutes are the most valuable commodity any of us have, no matter what we're doing, right? And I would, I just say, think of them like cash. You wouldn't waste, like $150 on a yard sale sweater, right? So our life minutes, you want to really use them wisely and really spend them as if they were cash. Enjoy yourself. That would be my advice.
I'm not nearly that philosophical. I should be though. Okay. Nothing has ever been accomplished by being reasonable. Ever. The needle doesn't move until an unreasonable person moves it. We as women are socialized to be reasonable, to be understanding and accepting. My best advice, be effing unreasonable.
I was gonna say something that wasn't that great. Give me a minute, give me a minute. I'm just kidding. No, I did know what I was gonna say, and one of the things that I think that I experienced as a student athlete was how difficult it was to actually stand and be in my own body and skin. Especially when it was obvious that who I was and what I wanted to be and how I wanted to exist in the world was not in line with that was happening around me. Specifically, I would say just being a disruptor, right? It's something that I wish I would have done more of. Like, I spend a lot of time doing that now. I do it in the work, I do it. Like, anybody that wants me to go to a meeting with them, like, if you have a meeting you need to go to, I'm coming and I can help you with that, to advocate, right? But I think just existing in your own body the way that you feel that you want to be and exist on the outside that way, and not allow the norms, right? And not allow the way in which we sort of continue to be, right? We exist in this cycle of socialization, and it continues and it gets reinforced all the time. So being willing to step outside of that is something that I do now really well, but I wish that I would have thought about that when I was in your shoes, because there's so many things that I want to go back and change and do differently, and there's so many ways that I want to exist out loud that I couldn't then because of what was happening around me and not having the courage to do so.
I would say, see something, say something, especially if you're male, if you're white, if you're privileged. The way things get changed is by everybody being an ally. I know we were talking about the basketball. The women's basketball last year had, in the tournament had, their facilities weren't as good, the weight rooms weren't as good, the uniforms weren't as good, and they spoke up. And with soccer, the male soccer players spoke up to support equity. So be an ally, support each other, see something, say something.
Let's give a round of applause to our panelists.
Thank you all for coming. If you came in a little bit late, there's some snacks in the back. Feel free to grab them. Our panelists have agreed to stick around for a little bit. If you have any questions or you would like to talk with any of them, please come forward and do so.